it's Donna Carpenter. Come on! It's good to have you.
Thanks so much.
That way.
Woo, that's a lot of people, and it's not easy to follow Barack Obama, even if it is the next day. This is my second major speech to entrepreneurs in Europe this year, and at the last one in Switzerland, I had to go right before Boris Johnson. So I'm liking this conference better already. And I have to, yeah. I do have to say I can't help myself, but thank you, Barack Obama, for all you've done and for making us proud. I'm going to send him one of our dump Trump boards, I think, yeah. So, as you know, I am the co-owner and co-CEO of Burton Snowboards. I can't say co-founder. My husband started it in 1977. I met him in 1982 after he said all the hard work was done, all the heavy lifting was done. So Burton is based out of Vermont, but Jake and I are spending the year and part of next year here in Europe, based out of Zurich. My goal as CEO was to really immerse myself in our major European markets. Since January, I've spent meaningful time with our global community, our global tribe, our employees, our sales agents, and our major retailers in 13 countries. By the middle of next year, I will have visited close to 20 countries, and that's only half the markets that our European headquarters serves. In every country I've visited, from Sweden to Bulgaria, from Finland to France, I've heard stories about families discovering that the best times they have together when riding, and how snowboarding, the experience of surfing down a mountain, that feeling, has changed the trajectory of so many lives. I'm so blessed to get to hear the stories about people from different backgrounds, different nationalities, different cultures, finding common ground in their love of the mountains and the freedom they feel when surfing down the hill. Living in Europe, focused on the European markets, is actually like coming home for Jake and me, and it's really full circle for my personal career. Jake and I lived here in the mid-'80s for a few years in Innsbruck, not too far from here. It's when and where we started our European headquarters, having already been established in the US. That sounds really sexy, right? Starting a European operation in the 90s. Well, it wasn't. It was a shit show. As entrepreneurs making an actual product in pre-European Union Europe, we spent as much time in the warehouse, on the loading dock, and with customs agents as we did anywhere else. And I'm convinced that our conservative Tyrolean neighbors thought we were just a front for a drug operation. So we've come a long way since then, and it's hard to capture more than 40 years as a brand and a sport, but the BBC recently asked Jake to talk about the history of snowboarding for one of their programs. I think it does a good job of capturing over 40 years history in about 4 minutes. So here goes. Nope, that's not it. Do I have a video? There we go.
Snowboarders, we've always stood out. And in the beginning, we stuck out like a sore thumb. We had one board, we didn't have ski boots on, we didn't have poles, we were just, I think, anti-establishment. You are a rebel. What you're doing is irreverent. When you're in powder, when you do a turn and then there's so much snow that flies into your face and you can't see a damn thing, it's just... My name is Jake Burton Carpenter. Yeah, I am referred to as a father of snowboarding, and I'm immensely proud of that. As a kid, I just always loved snow. It was something that just grabbed me. That whole winter mood and vibe was something that I loved right as a very young child. I was 13 or 14 when I got my first snurfer, which was simply like a skateboard for snow, and it was nothing more than a piece of wood that was curved on the end. It had a rope on the front that's how you would sort of maintain your balance and not lose it. I bought a snurfer, and I just fell in love with this sensation of surfing in snow. And I saw a sport there from a very young age. I mean, and I always thought that they would do it. And it sort of was a fad that came and went, but it never left for me. But I knew that you needed to have your feet better attached to the binding. I had to make over 100 prototypes before I decided on a production board. I mean, I was clueless. When I started, I knew nothing about manufacturing. I bought this fancy pin router, and twice the thing shot the snowboard into the wall. It was like, bing, like throwing a knife into a wall or something. I mean, it would have gone right through me. I can remember one moment when I was working with this company that was a manufacturer of furniture, and we took some wood and we bent the tip, and then I just put bindings on right there. And on my drive home, I jumped out of the car and I just wrote it on the side of the road, and it was, yes, huge step. 82, we had our first competition. We were not even allowed on ski resorts at the time, but 83, Stratton, which was the first major resort, Stratton Mountain in Vermont, sort of caters to the New York crowd. They gave us an opportunity and we performed, and it was a big date and a big milestone for the sport. Every day we'd find out about a new resort that was they're allowing, is what we say. They would allow us to go there. And then 98 was when it first went to the Olympics. It's very hard to get a sport off the ground and for it to ultimately get to the Olympics. And I didn't do it alone. I mean, I started, and pioneered for sure, but so many people got involved. It's a tribe.
So if Jake is the visionary entrepreneur, I guess you'd call me the accidental entrepreneur. I was living in New York City, going to Columbia University. I was on a ski trip to Stratton Mountain when I met this guy in a bar on New Year's Eve. I was way too cool for this guy making this kind of surfboard, skateboard thing by himself in a barn, and no less. But like many others, the sport of snowboarding and the community of snowboarding has really changed the arc of my story. I never intended to become part of the business. Shortly after we married in 1985, Jake decided he wanted to come here, actually to Austria, in order to produce a snowboard like a ski, which I'll talk about a little bit later. I had another job lined up with a US nonprofit working in Austria, and a few weeks before we left, Jake said, hey, do you mind taking a look at these letters? Remember letters? People actually used to write us letters asking about snowboarding, about wanting to try it. So while we didn't come here to sell anything, turns out there was quite a demand. So I declined the other job I had, and the next thing I knew, I was 23 years old. I was setting up an office, a warehouse, and distribution all over Europe. The rest, they say, is history. There are now millions of snowboarders around the world riding at resorts, and it is one of the most watched sports at the Winter Olympics. Burton, the brand, is a multi-hundred-million-dollar company with 9 global offices and over 1,000 employees worldwide. We are profitable, we are growing, and Jake and I still own every share. It's been quite the journey. As I was preparing, As I was preparing for this conference, I was trying to think through what does it take to make a successful entrepreneur, whether you're a visionary entrepreneur like Jake or an accidental one like me. I don't believe there's an exact science to that, but I can tell you what it feels like. And it feels a lot like snowboarding, right? There are some really good days. There are some days that seem almost divine inspired, right? You've got powder, fresh snow, sunshine, no wind, like you saw in the beginning of that video. Then there are other days that are absolutely terrifying. I remember this past summer, I was snowboarding at Mount Hutt in New Zealand. And the whiteout was so bad that I thought I had come to a stop. I thought I was standing still, but I was actually moving backwards. That's how disorienting it was. And I think that's probably a pretty good metaphor for being an entrepreneur. The really bluebird sunshine powder days are fun, but so are the days when there are tougher conditions, because the challenge of weathering the storm makes getting down the hill that much sweeter. Leading and founding a company can be stressful and exhausting. The disorienting days can far outnumber the bluebird days. So what keeps an entrepreneur going? I'll tell you what kept us going. As Jake mentioned in the video, we're referred to as the rebels or the adolescents or the troublesome teenagers of the ski industry. And as a teenager myself and the mother of teenagers, I can tell you what happens when you tell a teenager no. They just dig in harder and do it anyway. Actually, it probably motivates them to work harder at it. I've been thinking lately that that's really what it takes to be a good entrepreneur. You have to be a teenager at heart. You have to take the no as a challenge to dig in and work harder. Back in '77, when Jake set out to create a business around a new sport that looked a lot like surfing on snow, he heard a lot of no's. No, this won't work. No, you don't know what you're doing. That part was sort of true. No, ski areas will never allow it. The no's only motivated him to work harder and prove them wrong. He always says revenge is a good motivating factor. I remember in 1984, the US Ski Association literally, physically said no to us at our first trade show. We had a friend who had a booth, so maybe it wasn't quite official that we were there, but we were sharing this booth. And even before the show started, the US Ski Industry Association sent us a letter that said, you are not part of this show, you don't belong here, and you have to leave now. And they sent these big union guys to physically remove the product from the booth. I remember Jake having kind of a tug of war with this guy. We won, we stayed. Shortly after that, we had the experience, like I said, of coming here to Europe and visiting most of the major ski factories here in the Alps, in Switzerland, Austria, and Bavaria. And, like you saw in the video, at the time, the snowboard was just a piece of wood with a rope on the end and a couple straps for your feet. They were never meant to be ridden at ski areas. That really wasn't our vision. They were meant to be ridden on the back hills. But starting in the mid-'80s, Jake said, what if we steal skiing's technology? What if we find somebody who can make this with fiberglass, wood core, steel edges? We couldn't, at the time, all ski production was here in the Alps. We couldn't afford to come over because we were in major startup mode. But on an all-expense paid vacation to the Alba, thanks to my parents, Jake decided to drive around, make appointments, and see all those factories. He drove around, I think he ultimately saw 5 or 6 factories. The first 5 times he was told, no, we can't make that. We're not going to completely change our tooling to make this product. But like a lot of entrepreneurs, persistence is like a superpower for Jake, and he refused to give up. So he was driving around, he was coming to his last stop, a small ski factory called Keil Ski outside of Salzburg, Austria. By this time, it was in the middle of a snowstorm, and by this time it was midnight. They had to wake up the owner's daughter to translate, and Herr Keil said, yeah, you know what? I think I can make that. So today, Keil is still one of the largest single producers of snowboarding, of snowboards, employing close to 100 people and producing exclusively for us. So sometimes success depends on pushing through the no's till you get to a yes. The persistence to be an entrepreneur, to overcome those no's, came from passion. It has to start from passion. We talk a lot about following our passion. I actually think we talk too much about that. Really, it's about sustaining that passion over time. More than 25 years ago, Jake made a commitment to snowboard at least 100 days a year. I'm up to about 60, 70, not as sexy, but still a lot of days. And we do everything we can to get people in our company and our partners out snowboarding. Why? Why do we do that? Honestly, we had seen in the 80s what had happened to the ski industry. They had lost their passion. They weren't passionate about their sport anymore. There was no energy. Not surprisingly, there was no innovation. I like to say they had become a bunch of suits with spreadsheets. And we committed a long time ago that that wasn't going to happen to us. We were not going to lose our collective passion. So we had passion for getting down the mountain this new way. We fell in love with the sense of freedom, that almost spiritual feeling you get from surfing on snow. And honestly, our main purpose, our main goal all the time was really just to share that natural high with the rest of the world. But that doesn't explain 40 years in business, because passion, I believe, to be sustained needs a purpose, a reason for being that's bigger than you. Passion without purpose is not sustainable. It's meaningless. Passion without purpose is an empty promise. The only way to sustain your passion is by having a community and reason for being that's bigger than you as an individual. So in the beginning, we clearly had a purpose beyond our passion, right? Fighting for acceptance at the ski areas, fighting for acceptance at the trade shows, in the ski shops. And you know what that fight and that bigger purpose did for us? I always say it made us a humble culture. Humility, being humble, is a quality I think a lot of entrepreneurs and companies lose with their success. President Obama actually mentioned it. You might have a grand vision, a big idea, and some founding values. But when you're growing fast or blitzing, like we heard yesterday, it's hard to stay humble. It's hard to stay true to those founding values. It's hard to stay humble when you've hit the big time and make a shit ton of money, right? Because we face so much rejection on so many levels for so long, I think we developed a culture of humility. Jake always tells the story in the beginning, one of his first road trips to retailers. He packed up his car with 100 of these wood boards, right? Really excited to get on the road. He came back 2 days later with 110 boards because a dealer had returned 10. So that's humility. And I always say, I think we succeeded here in Europe under my leadership because we were humble. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know how to do business in Europe. The sport was new, the company was new, everything was new. So I really approached it with a humble mindset. Teach me what I need to know. I remember, in contrast, meeting a rep from an American surf clothing company at the time. And he said, we're going to teach the Europeans how to do business, how to sell clothes. And I thought, I think they've been doing that a couple hundred years before we have. So I think that there's a lot we could learn. I remember this mindset sort of paying off after a couple of years. I was again at a trade show at ISPO, which is here in Munich, with a bunch of German retailers. And they were sitting around complaining about how difficult it was to work with American action sport companies. And I said, hey, wait a minute, I take offense to that. We're an American action sports company. And they said, oh, no, you're a European company selling an American product. You do things our way. You're one of us. That's when I knew we had succeeded here. So neither of us had the skills or the background. We had passion and we had purpose, and we had the attitude that we would figure it out. Like most entrepreneurs, we were willing to fail. We expected to fail. How were we going to learn anything if we didn't have some failures? But as we grew, it became clear at one point to me, at one defining moment, that the prospect of succeeding or failing was no longer just about us and our big idea. And I think this is true for all entrepreneurs. At a certain point, it's no longer just about you. As you grow, you hire people with families, people who depend on you for a living. Like other lessons, I kind of learned this one the hard way. It was 1989. I was chief financial officer. We were growing literally triple digits. We were profitable. We had an amazing bank deal. I was so cocky about this bank deal I got with no collateral and a great interest rate and all that. But then the savings and loan crisis happened in the US. And for those of you who don't remember the savings and loan crisis, I think about 1,500 banks went out of business in 1989. And even though I had a deal with a 3-year deal with the bank, and they hadn't been directly affected by the crisis, they said, we're a $20 billion bank and we want to be a $12 billion bank. We're going to eliminate any loans that we see are risky, and you're one of them. So the only agreement I really had with them was that we had to be profitable and I had to stay clean and not borrow money for 30 days. We had to support ourselves for 30 days. Now, it's important to remember Burton has never had any long-term debt or outside investors. We've been so disciplined about that, but we have these intense seasonal borrowing needs. So I kept us clean for 45 days, and then I went to, pay payroll. And the bank said, we got to talk. The big boys in the office think that this is a risky loan. Sorry, no cash. I was 6 months pregnant with our first son, and I had to walk around to 50 employees and say, that paycheck you got there, you can't cash it. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. I said, I'm working on emergency funding. It took me just under 3 weeks to get emergency funding. And in the meantime, not a single employee complained, not a single employee left. I remember a woman in our accounts payable. I knew she had 2 kids in daycare, single mom. And like the rest of the employees, she said, it's okay, we believe in what you're doing, and we know this wasn't through any fault of your own, and let us know when we can cash a paycheck. I always knew we were a community, but it was in that moment I realized we had created more than a workplace. We had created a family committed to each other through good times and bad. With over 1,000 employees today, we are still known for our family-like culture. And a lot of CEOs ask me, how do you develop a family-like culture? And I always say, you put them through hell, and then when you come out the other side, you're a family. There was another moment in our history when we really had to put family first, when we had to proactively change our culture to better reflect our values of inclusion and community. About 15 years ago, Jake and I were sitting in a meeting of all of our global directors from around the world, about 25 people. There were 2 women in the room. I think at that moment, Jake knew at a gut entrepreneurial level that we were not going to thrive. We were not going to be innovative. We were not going to attract the best talent without diversity. I understood at that point that it was up to me to do something about the underrepresentation of women at the company. So we fully committed. I launched the Women's Leadership Initiative, and we made it our mission to recruit talented women, to develop women at Burton, and to influence the industry to follow our lead. What I've learned is that women's leadership is not a feel-good initiative. It's not even a do-good initiative. It's a bottom-line initiative. Again, I think Obama mentioned this yesterday, that there is strong scientific research that companies with diversity, and that means at least 35% female leadership, are more profitable and better governed. So we went from under 10% of our global leadership being female to 50%. 6 of our 12 top leaders are women. Even more importantly, I think, women leaders at Burton are in non-traditional female roles. No, our head of HR is not a woman. It's a guy. No, the head of our foundation, our charitable foundation, is not a woman, it's a guy. But our chief marketing officer, our head of strategy, our head of Japan, which is very unusual, and our general manager for all of North America are women. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't easy. It took 15 years and it wasn't easy. There were and are a lot of no's along the way. No, women shouldn't get special treatment. We heard, no, it's going to change our culture. We won't be so cool anymore. No, you won't be able to attract the right talent. But these no's just made me and still make me more determined. We will continue to improve upon this, and I believe that a crucial part of being a CEO or an entrepreneur is really seeing the change that needs to be made and then making it happen. Another shift in our company and culture came when we took a hard look at sustainability as a company. As you can see, the outdoors and the natural outdoors is a really important part of who we are. And as a privately held company, we've always given back to the sport in a way that no other company has. We have invested, put our money where our mouth is in the long-term sustainability of the sport. We support athletes at every level. We support events at every level. We work with resorts on our Learn to Ride programs, our kids equipment and programs, and we have the Chill Foundation, which is committed to getting thousands of kids a year out snowboarding who wouldn't otherwise have the chance. So we've always been committed to the long-term sustainability of the sport. That mattered to us. But 10 years ago, we weren't talking climate change. In fact, A lot of people in our industry didn't want to talk about climate change. We heard a lot of no's when we started to address it. No, it's going to be too expensive. No, it's going to be too complicated. No, your consumer doesn't care. I heard that from surf companies, that consumer doesn't care. Or no, it's just greenwashing. Or no, it's just a lost cause. But remember, we're teenagers, right? I think the founders also said they were pirates, right? So we took no as a challenge. 8 years ago, we took a serious look at our supply chain, our products, our office culture, and we made some really big changes. We've made a lot of progress in the last 8 years, in spite of the no's, or maybe because of the no's. I'll give you just a couple of examples. 91% of Burton's clothing and outerwear hitting the market this fall is Blue Sign certified. Blue Sign is a great Swiss standard limiting toxic chemicals. We are far outpacing all of our competitors, whether it's Patagonia, North Face, Picture, they all have a goal of getting to 100%. We are far outpacing all of them, and we are the only company that has a solid plan to get to 100%. We're also a participating company in the Fair Labor Association, which has the highest standards, the highest international standards, ensuring fair labor practices and safe conditions and ethical treatment in all of our factories. A couple years ago, we decided we had to do more than just green our own house, right? We really had to try. We weren't going to get real change, it was important work that we were doing to become sustainable in terms of toxic chemicals and human rights, but we weren't going to move the needle unless we spoke up and became advocates. So Burton partners with BICEP, Businesses for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy, and POW, Protect Our Winters, to advocate for stronger climate policy. At the core of every decision we make, we're thinking about the health of the outdoor industry and our entire community. As a business, it's not the easiest way forward, but as citizens with a responsibility to make an impact, it's the only way forward. We feel the consequences of the climate crisis accelerating all around us. We recognize we have to do something about it. Burton is proud to have participated in the recent global climate strike on September 20th and 27th. Following the lead of Greta Thunberg and students everywhere, we closed our businesses to march together and send a message for change. We used our flagship stores as action centers where people made signs and could walk to nearby marches. And for 24 hours on September 20th, we shut down our website, not taking orders, and instead redirected to the Global Climate Strike website. With both of the issues, we put our money where our mouth is. With both of the issues that I just spoke about, gender equality in the workplace and climate change, I believe that all companies have a responsibility to take action and strive for excellence in both of these areas. We cannot depend on our governments to do it for us anymore. It's going to be up to businesses. One of the great things about a conference like this is it brings people together from different nationalities, different cultures, different economic sectors. But we can connect with one another and share our ideas on these important issues to ensure that we're leading with the values and a sense of purpose for the common benefit. One of the most rewarding things I do as a CEO for the last 5-6 years is participate in the Global Women in Sports Mentoring Program. This is a joint program done by the US State Department and ESPN, and it pairs young women from developing countries who are trying to make a difference in their countries through women and sports, and they pair them for a month, about a month and a half, with a female sports executive. My last mentee was an ultimate frisbee player from India, southern India. When she first came to Burton, she said she was extremely skeptical about what she could learn from an American company. By the end of her mentorship, she gave me the greatest compliment I could ask for. She said that because of her personal experience in India, she assumed all companies, and especially American companies, were selfish, exploitative, and corrupt. But after spending time with us, she realized a company could be a force for good in the world. As leaders, we need to connect with each other, get outside of our comfort zone, and learn more about how other people see us to better connect with our customers all over the world. This leads me to kind of my last point here on being an entrepreneur, what I think makes a great entrepreneur, and that is resilience. If you look up the word resilience in the dictionary, it's defined as the ability to recover quickly through difficulties and change, to adapt, to be agile, to learn from every mistake, to get up again when you fall, to go through, over, and around obstacles. Sounds like snowboarding, right? The Burton community is one of the most resilient group of people I know. We've had to be, right? For years, snowboarders were told, no, you can't ride here. No, it's too dangerous. No, you're too reckless. We've had to fight on issues such as climate change and gender equality. We've had to overcome very narrow-minded bankers. We've had to fight through some crazy economic times as well as some personal times. Because of all the powerful no's we've had to overcome, I think Burton's culture has an amazing sense of resilience. Because of this, we've had a long-standing tradition of giving the middle finger. For the opposite of what you might think. Now I need that photo. Oh, back one. There we go. This photo was taken 4 years ago at our headquarters in Vermont when the company learned that Jake was fully paralyzed by an autoimmune disorder, temporarily but fully paralyzed for many months. For several weeks, he was about as close as death as anybody can get. The employees got together spontaneously, took this photo, blew it up, and added a caption that's not there. It says, "We fucking love you," by the way. Put up the caption, "We fucking love you," and Jake hung it at the end of his hospital bed. As you can see, our other international offices, Japan, Europe, Australia, quickly followed suit. Japan has a little hard time doing it, kind of compared. But they're in there and they're in spirit. Thankfully, Jake is fully recovered now and back to snowboarding 100 days a year. But we are so grateful for the support of the Burton community and our company. I keep these photos framed and hung right outside my office to remind me of the amazing resilience of my community and company. So if I had to share one piece of advice with the entrepreneurs in this room, it would be use no to your advantage. If someone tells you you can't do something or your plan will never work, then get out there and prove them wrong. And maybe the first time you try it, your plan will fail. You will probably fall down hard. But get back up again, just like Jake did after he was sick, and just like new snowboarders do when they're learning. I'd like to believe that I had a surefire method or a secret way of what's the best way to be an entrepreneur, but I don't. What I can say is that I believe Jake and I have succeeded thus far because we've had some core fundamental values: humility, inclusion, sustainability, and because we've managed to stay humble through the process. Even though we are now a global company with offices in 9 countries and over 1,000 employees, we're still headquartered in Vermont. It's still privately held. And we still treat every person like a member of our own family. So in business, like in life, things can get crazy tough, and it's easy to give up, easy to take no for an answer. It's easy not to be resilient. But when it's bigger than you, when it's about a bigger community and a greater purpose, sometimes you just can't say no. Thank you.